everyone, welcome back to the Blast Off. Today we are going to talk to you all about the NASA SpaceX launch that didn't happen. But you know what? It's just a matter of time before this historic event happens. So we thought it would be a great time to just chat about our kind of experience with launching stuff to space. Why do we care about going to space, and just what happens to the human body in space? So earlier this year, we had an experiment. You can actually see an illustration of it behind me. That is this little microgravity experiment, and this is part of the SHINE program. And so Sarah has also worked on the SHINE program, and this is where we work with high school students and university students, and we allow them to design, build, and program their own little teensy tiny experiment that flies on the space station. So earlier this year in February, we had our third experiment on the launch pad in the rocket within its own capsule, getting ready to launch, and 2 minutes before it was meant to go, scrubbed. So it's certainly disappointing. We can empathize with those astronauts that were on that rocket. They were ready to go. President Trump was standing by in the rain, waiting to say, launch America, and it just didn't happen. But better safe than sorry. And you might be wondering, well, if they were on the launch pad, ready to go, rocket fueled up, fancy new spacesuits on, why didn't they just wait like an hour? And that's because these launch windows are very, very narrow. And when I say narrow, I mean like 2 minutes wide. And because it's a manned or crewed space flight, if something were to go wrong and the astronauts were going to need to evacuate the capsule while they still could, you would also want to make sure that the weather wherever they were being flung out to would be suitable for rescue. So we wouldn't want to eject them into a hurricane or lightning storm. Not a great situation. Like out of the frying pan into the fire, no good. So it's postponed. The good news is that we might see them go up as early as this weekend. So stay tuned. You can always check it out on NASA TV. But that's a little bit about kind of our background in the launch. I want to now throw it over to Sarah, who can tell us, a little bit more about, why do we care about doing science in space? Sarah?
All right. So I've always loved astronauts, as probably every kid that was born from the 50s onwards has, right? So astronauts seem so cool, and they seem like they have the coolest job in the entire world. But I don't think we really appreciate exactly what their job is. We just know they get to go to space and get to wear a cool suit and get to wave down on us little earthlings. But they actually have some of the most important jobs in research science that we have today. So they are actually investigating what happens in microgravity, and it's something that until very recently, in the last couple of decades, we didn't understand very well, and there's still several aspects that we don't understand very well. And so those astronauts are not only space crew flying around manning the amazing ISS, but they are actually doing like science experiments and monitoring science experiments that have been sent up to them as well, which is very cool. And so you might ask, what can happen in microgravity? Lots of very interesting things. So for one example is our human body acts completely differently in microgravity, because we're little earthbound creatures. We're used to being in our nice little gravitational pull of the earth, and all of a sudden when you take that away, we've learned some of the most interesting facts about the human body from these astronauts up there doing the experiments basically on their own body and seeing what happens. So one interesting thing is that they grow taller because they don't have that weight of gravity, and all of a sudden everything is starting to pull apart, and so their bones, their spine is able to decompress. And they're able to get up to, I think it's 3% taller, so they can grow up to 2 inches from just a short couple months in space, which is crazy. Imagine growing 2 inches in just a couple months. Another amazing thing that happens is their blood loss. And so astronauts can come back missing it's like a litre or so, upwards of a couple of litres of blood, which means that for a few days, up to a couple of weeks on Earth, they need to regenerate all of those blood cells before they're able to walk without fainting and exist as a human again, which I think is so interesting. But Rebecca actually worked on a very cool experiment, so the SHINE experiment that she just mentioned, on chia seeds in space. And so what were you guys investigating on chia seeds?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah. So one thing about, it's one thing that just to be a human experiencing this very low gravity environment, and the students this year on the project, well, they were thinking, it's one thing just to exist, but astronauts have to eat too. And, we know the world is obsessed with their superfoods and, chia seed smoothies and all of that. And so we thought, well, why not try to grow chia seeds in this microgravity environment? Because you think, oh, well, it's growing seeds. It's something we take for granted on Earth. But even the simplest things, like growing a plant, in space, it becomes an entirely different ball game. And that's because, just think about planting the seeds, watering them, making sure they get enough light. And so if you have to simulate that environment, and there's some things that you can't replicate, like gravity. And so we wanted to see what would happen with the seeds. And of course, they have to, our little experiment has to survive that very energetic, violent rocket launch. And so the idea is that, we go through and we're able to test all of these different versions of the experiment on Earth. And then so we try to make something which is as flight ready and as space ready as possible. And it goes up and it sits on the space station for a whole month. And that's incredible. So, some of these astronauts, they're up there for months and months at a time. But for a single experiment made by students to get to stay up there that long, that's really on the same level as the research that the NASA scientists themselves are doing. And what we found out was that unfortunately, our little seeds did not do so hot. And we think that's because the temperature that was surrounding them was almost over 40 degrees centigrade the entire time. So it's not maybe the ideal place for chia seeds to germinate. And it just helps you realize that you think that you've prepared for all of the different outcomes, for this experiment, that you've thought of everything that could happen. And there's still something that, once you get up into space, you realize, okay, well, without, the ability for something to cool, we've got an entire planet for, heat to transfer and everything, but being locked in a small capsule on something which obviously isn't releasing out into space to cool off, how are you going to regulate the temperature? And so it's just, these fascinating questions that we're able to ask, and these simple processes that happen on Earth that we get to then transform into space, and just discover how challenging it is to even try to grow seeds in space. So yeah, pretty cool experiment, learning a lot just from something that you think is completely simple.
I think it's really cool to think about how difficult it was to try grow seeds on the space station. Imagine when eventually we're going to want to go to Mars, and we're going to need to be able to grow and, regulate ourselves for a couple-year journey all the way to Mars, and then when we get there, to try grow things as well, to survive. And it's going to be really, really difficult and exciting, and it's going to lead us to a lot of new discoveries and innovations, which I think is very cool. And so that's why space flight and space science is so important, is because even though we're investigating things that may seem simple, so growing a seed seems simple, but the technologies around how to actually do that lead to a lot of innovation, a lot of inventions and discoveries and prototyping of new things, which is very exciting. So there's some things that we wouldn't have if it wasn't for space technology. And one of them is it Wi-Fi?
Well, I know there's Wi-Fi in terms of just, communications, because we think about like satellites And so being able to have something which, you can send information across this large distance. Well, obviously, if we're trying to, send things to spacecraft that are in outer space, and the whole idea of satellites and the way they communicate, and what Elon Musk is doing with SpaceX, that whole idea that's tied around communication. So ultimately, in sharing data. And so ultimately, this challenge of existing in space, communicating in space, and all of that will help us with innovations in our everyday life. And one, I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's the perfect kind of thing to come back around to, is unfortunately right now we're dealing with this horrible virus everywhere in the world. And what's scary but fascinating at the same time is it seems like things like bacteria and microbes, they behave differently in microgravity as well. So that then opens up the idea for this area of research of studying viruses and maybe even vaccines in space, in this completely different environment that we cannot replicate on Earth. And then perhaps some incredible, medicine can be created on the space station, because we think about astronauts and how vulnerable they are because of all of these things that they experience. And so then we can come back, and then that could actually really benefit the entire world.
Yeah, I agree. I just did some quick Googling. It wasn't Wi-Fi, it was wireless technology, wireless functions.
Yeah.
I love myself fixing
That's okay. It's kind of, I don't want to say all the same thing, because then the person that patented it would be like, no, it's different. But like this, these ideas and challenges, and that's what's so fantastic about what we're doing, at the university, and just getting to work with students that are in high school, but that are also in university, is because there are all of these challenges, because we operate in space in so many different areas. It's not just about sending people to space. We have satellites in space, we have all this different stuff that we're interested in doing, and learning how space can help us. And so students, regardless of what level you're on, you can work and be part of these solutions as well. And so that's, the next person that's going to come up with the next Wi-Fi and Internet of Things, wireless communication. These aren't going to be, seasoned engineers, but these are going to be people who are faced with the challenge and have the creative ability to come up with it. The seasoned engineers are also amazing. I don't want to, they build the cool rockets and stuff. Let's don't take away from their contributions. I'm just saying everybody has a chance to be part of these incredible discoveries and innovations.
That's right, which is exciting because in the future, the majority of jobs are going to be somewhere focused in information technology and science fields. So we're shifting from where the workforce has been in the past 100 or so years to now the most valuable type of education that you can have is in the critical thinking to be able to do problem solving and think about solutions for upcoming problems that we don't even know exist yet. Which I think is very awesome to be a part of in our own little way.
Absolutely. We love taking all of the incredible discoveries and things that are happening in space and telling you about them, because we want you to be just as inspired as we are. And we want people to realize that, if you're interested in art and engineering and helping other people, that there's a lot of that we do in space. And that's what these astronauts are doing. They're really trying to help other people through the research and the dangerous missions that they're doing. And so, we definitely salute them for that. Certainly braver than me. I don't think I would be ready to go into space until that Dragon capsule was a lot more cush and comfortable, and especially going on to Mars. So it's really incredible. And I can't wait till they are actually able to launch and get up there.
Me too. I think it's going to be very exciting. And as Rebecca said, you can watch it on NASA TV, which is actually a fantastic thing to put on the background while you're working, because all of a sudden you'll be working and you'll be like, oh, Earth, and it's beautiful and it's amazing. So I would recommend that.
So we'll leave you to that so that you can go check out NASA TV and look at our, glorious world from the perspective of these brave men and women who are performing incredible science experiments in space. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Blast Off. Thanks so much for joining us.